Let's talk to Will Kingston, political commentator and host of the Fire at Will podcast. I mean, given Will the necessity for him to put like a video out about every couple of hours, this one doesn't appear to... Maybe the guy who puts the music on them isn't travelling with him to Canada. I don't know. But it's very weird, isn't it?
Mike, what you've got to remember is that there's a 25-year-old social media manager who's doing this, and they're trying to humanise a 65-year-old robot.
Yeah.
And there's a very big disconnect there.
But how can anybody in their right mind, though, I mean, regardless of age, Will, look at that and go, yeah, happy with that, definitely, let's put that out. Why?
Because if you are in a social media management role, your job is to try and make your boss connect with the electorate, but they don't understand that people aren't buying it. You've got to have some clay to try and mould, and there just isn't any with Keir Starmer. There is no essence, there's no soul, there's no core to him, and people get that. Like, they really should just try and play the... and this would be difficult, but the whole, you know, I'm boring, I'm a bit of a kind of soulless robot, but I'm competent, I get the job done. But the sad reality is he's not getting the job.
I was going to say the problem with that particular piece of advice is he's not particularly competent, and he's really not getting the job done. And they do keep saying it. They keep saying these things like, the plan is working. This is why we're doing this. And now, I mean, the barefaced lie of this grooming gangs thing is quite staggering, isn't it? Because even for him to make a U-turn as dramatic as this, because it's not just about the fact that he didn't want to do it before, it's about the fact that he was so vociferous about why he didn't want to do it before, and it was because he didn't want to jump on a right-wing bandwagon. We've got plenty of evidence, and in fact I'll play it to you now if you haven't seen it, an incredible montage of Labour sort of bigwigs in the government saying why it's not necessary to have an inquiry. Check it out.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics.
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry.
Do you want an inquiry or not?
No, Paul, I'm trying to answer your question, and the answer is no. We don't think another inquiry, after all the many inquiries that we've put victims through, is the way to tackle this.
There has been a huge amount of misinformation this week. Sadly, party political misinformation. It is just wrong.
We've already had a lengthy inquiry, which ended...
broad inquiry that encompassed some parts of the, some towns, 6 towns, I believe. 50 towns have been blighted by this issue. We don't know if it's still going on now. That inquiry was a much broader inquiry.
So you're right in saying it's broad, but we've got to look at what Professor Jay has said as well, which is that this doesn't need a further inquiry, and actually it's time for action.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was pretty much a good section of the cabinet there, and that idiot at the end, Mike Tapp, who's not in the cabinet as far as I know, talking about why it's not required. They're all now going to have to eat humble pie and remember that actually they now have to say something completely different. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, they're not going to eat humble pie, Mike, because we're entering a very painful new stage of the grooming gang saga, and that will be the gaslighting stage, where these MPs will pretend like all along that they were hardline on this, and they've always been supportive of measures to try and tackle the grooming gangs, and they just haven't been. I've been reflecting this morning, what is it about the spin of this Labor government that I find particularly infuriating? Because after all governments spin, and it is because they seem to insult your intelligence in a way which I don't even think Blair did. I don't even think, any of the Conservative governments over the last 14 years have done. Spin only takes you so far. It needs to be based on some kernel of truth, or it needs to actually be based on something which the government believes in, and they're trying to spin the best possible narrative to get it over the line. Whereas this government just basically takes things that they don't believe in, that we know they don't believe in, but they've been forced into a position to take, and therefore they just lie to you in order to do it. You mentioned earlier in your monologue, we've now fixed the foundations of the economy, so we're moving on to the next stage. People aren't stupid.
No.
They know that every single economic indicator has got worse since they've got in.
Right.
And I think it's this fundamental assault on the intelligence of British people that we find so frustrating. Because again, I don't think I've seen an equivalent in my lifetime in politics.
No, I think that is the problem, because all you have to do is look at any one of those videos that gets put out by, as you say, the 25-year-old social media boss or whoever it is, and they are all literally attacks on Keir Starmer, and I mean, we got to a point where Sadiq Khan now doesn't actually allow anybody to comment on the videos that he puts out because it got so bad. I mean, Starmer's going to have to do the same thing pretty soon, because literally one after another, every single comment is a negative one, either disbelieving what he's saying or accusing him of something, or just giving him abuse. There's never been in my world, in my view, a more unpopular Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's a combination of a lack of conviction and then a lack of talent or ability, and you put those two things together, and it's a terrible combination. And a lack of any sort of rhetorical flair or polish. Like, again, we know by the end that Boris Johnson, was pretty incompetent, but at least he had a bit of a rhetorical flair about him.
Yeah, but when you look at what Boris Johnson did, I mean, he was a far more competent Prime Minister and a far more competent politician than Keir Starmer's ever been. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it's all relative, isn't it? So yeah, it is incredibly frustrating, and it's just I do wonder now how much longer Keir Starmer has, because I think everyone in the Labor Party now is fully aware that he's not just unpopular in a way that a lot of leaders have been unpopular in their first year in office. He is toxic with the electorate. And I think it would actually be a very wise Labor Party that would take him in as the leader to the next election. Sorry, a very brave Labor Party.
Very. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to be around. But the lying thing seems to have spread now to everybody. It's not just Rachel Reeves. It's not just Keir Starmer. It's not just David Lammy. It's now even Darren Jones, who up until relatively recently was seen as a reasonably competent minister. He's kind of deputy in the Treasury to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. But have a look at what he said when he was on Question Time. He got a lot of flack for this.
And when you see that the majority of the people in these boats are children, babies and women who have been...
No, they're not.
No, they're not. Came the cry, and no, they're not, said the audience. And in fact, he then had to clarify it the following day, and he's been apologising ever since for what he says was a badly explained scenario. But you can see from that, he claims that when he went down to Dover, he was shown 2 boats that had arrived, or possibly 3 boats that arrived, that were full of women and children. That's not what he said. He said that everybody knows that the vast majority of the people who come to these shores on the small boats are women and children, which is absolutely categorically not true. More than 75% of them are single lone men of fighting age. It's a fact, and he lied about it.
Yeah, he did. But I think they're also living in a pre-social media. Ironically, for a government that's trying to change the narrative via social media, they also forget that social media works both ways.
Yeah.
And whereas in the past, we didn't see the footage of dinghies coming from France onto the beaches of the United Kingdom with our own eyes. We just read about it, sporadically in newspapers. Now you can see the footage. People can see it with their own eyes. So this sort of gaslighting no longer works. But the other thing I'd add very quickly on this, Mike, is that this is a common thread that runs through the lies of this government, and that it is lies to justify a failed ideology of multiculturalism, effectively, in that this is just something that he wants to be true. He wants to believe that these people are all poor, innocent women and children coming from war-torn countries, and it's our obligation to help them, when the facts don't add up to that. Same thing with grooming gangs. They want to believe that this isn't a problem around culture. It's just a problem probably around men, is probably how they would like to frame it. But it just doesn't add up to the reality. And so they keep pushing lies to try and prop up a failed ideology, which has been the backbone of left-wing politics for 40 years, and people are no longer buying it anymore.
Yeah, which is why we still get lefties going, oh yeah, but the vast majority of, grooming gangs are actually run by British white people. Well, that may well be true, but the whole point of the numbers game is that the Pakistani community in this country is a tiny minority of the people here, and they account for a far higher majority of those kind of gang activities. And that's why it's a story that they've been trying to cover up, because they don't want to have to admit that. For whatever reason, I don't know. But let's talk about another thing that's problematic, I think, for this government now, and it's been their approach to the Middle East. It's been their approach to Israel over the course of the last several months. And it's got so bad now that relations between Israel and the UK mean that Israel did not share information with the UK before they attacked Iran last Thursday night.
Yeah, well, this is another thing you've got to remember about this government, in that they are increasingly beholden to a growing Islamic voter base in this country. It's a voter base which is going to abandon them in the next election in favour of Islamic candidates. And again, the rise of Islamic sectarian politics is a whole other story that we can talk about at another time, Mike. But everything that this government does is through that prism. It is why they're not soft on the. It's why they're soft on the boats. It's why they are not a friend of Israel. at the moment, and the Israelis know that. They're well aware of the internal political dynamics of the United Kingdom, and it's why that you continue to hear this sort of mealy-mouthed pacifism from people like Lammy and Starmer, and it is purely because, well, sorry, I think it's two reasons. It's number one, because genuinely, I think ideologically they are not a friend of Israel. But number two, it is because they know that if they do take a more supportive position of Israel, they are going to lose votes in those sorts of now Islamic majority electorates, which are a growing proportion of the voter base of this country.
Yeah, absolutely right. Will, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Will Kingston, our political commentator, host of the Fire at Will podcast.